This is Antic, the Atari 8-Bit Podcast. I'm Kevin Savitz. Bruce Campbell is the author of Character Fun, an educational game which was first published by Atari Program Exchange. It appeared in the winter 1983 APX Catalog, the final APX Catalog. Here's its description in that catalog: Character Fun by Bruce Campbell, recommended for ages 3 and up, written in BASIC. Character Fun is an extraordinary learning tool. It helps young children learn to identify letters and numbers. It gives them a chance to work with letters and numbers. It offers a chance to work with shapes and colors to create pictures. Maybe best of all, it provides a delightful first lesson in using a computer keyboard. The lively tunes Pop Goes the Weasel and Yankee Doodle quickly capture children's attention. A friendly face replaces the cursor. To give them an idea of the pictures they can create, 5 sample pictures are provided to spark their imaginations. Every key has an effect on the screen image. Children can space, position, and delete characters, control colors of characters and backgrounds, even print upside down and backwards. Best of all, a child's work can be saved to diskette for use later. Review comments: an exciting way to introduce young children to keyboard functions. Bright colors, sounds, and music all combine to capture and hold a young child's attention. Requires 1 Atari joystick controller. Order information: it was available on diskette only, which required 48K of RAM. It cost $24.95 and was APX Catalog number 20266. This interview took place on September 22, 2016. Shortly after we did this interview, Bruce sent me scans of the source code printout for Character Fun. It's now online at archive.org. You'll find a link in the show notes at ataripodcast.com.
Yeah, growing up, as I was going through school, middle school and high school, I was always interested in math and science. My father was a chemical engineer, so I got exposed to math and science a lot through him. And somewhere along the line, I became aware of computers. Of course, back in those days, we didn't have, smartphones and iPads and laptops and that type of stuff. They were all mainframe computers and environmentally controlled buildings. But I guess one of my first real experiences was a sophomore in high school. Our school system offered a course in Fortran, and it was voluntary, didn't cost anything. It was taught once a week at night, and my sister and I went. And what I remember from it is they gave each of us a box of pre-punched cards, and at the end of each class, we were given a problem to solve, had to sort through and pick the right cards, put them in the right order, put a job card on it, wrap a rubber band around it, give it back to the instructor, and it was actually a lady then, and she would put it in a big envelope, mail it up to 3M Company in St. Paul, Minnesota, and they'd send them back with the printouts. So we'd get one turnaround a week. And so it just kind of progressed from there. I majored in chemical engineering in college, but I did well enough my freshman year that I could get in the honors program, and so I talked to my advisor, and I eliminated things like public speaking, world history, a couple other electives, and substituted computer science for it. So I took Fortran, PL1, and COBOL programming languages, but mainly because I looked at computers as something that was going to be a very useful tool to me as an engineer.
Sure. Yeah.
So starting in about, the late 70s, early 80s, since I was working for Exxon when I got out of college and worked for them for 27 years, so there was a lot of computer software, and so I learned it and used it in my job, and so became very familiar with mainframe computers and working with software as part of my job. So I started looking, is there a way to get one of these things at home, right? Because I wanted to expose my kids to it at an early age, and so the first one was the Radio Shack. I think it was the TRS-80. Right, and I went to Radio Shack and tried it out, and it wasn't very impressive. The sound was awful. It didn't have colors, didn't have much memory, didn't have any kind of drive, as I recall. And then I started getting wind of the Apple and the Atari, right? And so when they became available, and Of course, they weren't cheap. I mean, you're paying $800 for an Atari computer or something, right, and over $1,000 for a dot matrix printer.
Yeah.
Right, when you consider that was back in the 80s, right, and now you can get an inkjet printer for a couple $100, right?
Right.
It was not something that was cheap, and I had a couple friends that were also interested in it, and we were comparing notes, and finally came to the conclusion that I think it was the Apple and the Atari 800 that we were comparing. I didn't like the Atari 400 because it had that kind of membrane keyboard. And
Right.
the Atari 800, its advantages over the Apple was it had 2 cartridge slots, right, and 4 joystick ports, and it was cheaper. It was about 60% of the cost. So I ended up buying one, and that's kind of the start of my home computer thing. And I haven't opened it up, but because I've moved a lot around the country, my Atari 800 is still wrapped in some moving wrapping paper. Shelf in my closet. I actually still have it.
Nice.
I have no idea whether it would still work, right, after all these years.
Right.
But that, in short, is how I got into it. And programming it was something that was just fun. I remember I got some software that was one of the first voice synthesizers that I used to just annoy my dog because I would program to call her name, and she'd bark because I put it through 2 big stereo speakers up on bookshelves, and she would look around and try and figure out where the voice was coming from, and that's what got me into programming this game Character Fun. I was trying to figure out a fun way to keep my young kids' attention, yet draw them to the keyboard. Right? So the keys would do all sorts of things. I don't know if you've seen the user's manual for it, but it basically had the equivalent of special characters that were kind of like Legos.
Right.
You could build little cars and buildings. Mr. Potato Head.
Right. There's one for faces and one for with trucks, and then all sorts.
And then, of course, all the letters could be in different colors, and you can turn them upside down and backwards and scroll them, and then the joysticks would put things on there and, have phaser fire and exploding bombs, and the screen would shake, and 2 different modes, one that had, I think, 12 lines and one had 4. And unfortunately, with the emulations that I've found that you can run on, Windows, they don't have a keyboard equivalent for holding down all 3 console keys. That's how you switched modes.
Yeah, that's what I was playing it this morning in my emulator on my Mac, and it was not. I couldn't find a way to press all start selected option at the same time. So.
Yeah, which is too bad, right? But I had people say, that was the best music they'd ever heard. And, of course, you had to use machine language and display list interrupts, to get that to go. But I actually pulled out sheet music because you had 4 sound registers, so you could play up to 4 notes at once. And so I worked pretty hard to make it sound good, and had Pop Goes the Weasel and Yankee Doodle Dandy. And then I heard about the Atari Program Exchange, and so I thought, well, what the heck? And I sent it to them, and they came back with a few comments, fairly minor. They didn't hit this button. They want press, so it's less violent. And they were just about ready to submit it to their contest, and then I got this panic phone call from this lady who said, we just tried it on the new Atari 5200, and it doesn't work. And so she sent me a quick instruction book on how to compare the two, and of course I didn't have access to a 5200. I wanted to go buy one.
Right.
So I asked around at work, and it turned out, one of the engineers just down the hall from me had just bought one, and I said, this is going to sound like a weird request. I explained to him what was going on. I said, can I borrow it, for the weekend? And he said, sure. So that's how I figured out the problem, and then made some changes to the program and resubmitted it. And it actually won second prize in their education contest, and my award was $1,500 in hardware and software. Right, and but after that, a little catalog came out, and this is kind of near the end of the Atari Program Exchange, because then Commodore came in and they eliminated it.
Right. Yeah.
So I never got any money out of it, and I obviously didn't submit any other programs. But I wrote a couple more for my kids. I wrote a battleship program, and little burning ships and little bombs, and so you had to look away from the screen when your opponent was putting their ships in, right? And they, my kids loved that. And then my daughter at the time was, when I wrote this one, was probably about 4. And we had this math program called Monkey Up a Tree.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. And the thing that was nice about it is the faster you answered the problem, the harder the problems got. So I just played it honestly, and so she and I would play it, and she would still be at things like 6 plus 8, and I'd be 23 times 175. And she always got a kick when my monkey would slide down the tree, and the graphics were basically the palm trees, and the monkeys would climb up the tree and slide down if you missed it, and if you got enough to get to the top, it'd grab a banana, slide down, and sit there munching on it. The graphics weren't spectacular, but they were fun, but my concern was I wanted her to focus on the math, and they were just little white letters down at the bottom. So I built my own, and I used some of the graphics modes to build the math problems. So they were in plaids and sparkling colors, but they 3 numbers high to fill the whole screen. Add, subtract, multiply, divide, and especially with multiplication, I built in a timer, right? And I was working initially with addition and subtraction with my 4-year-old, and I got pennies out and said, well, count them out, right? And it's amazing how quickly kids get good at that kind of stuff, all right? But what frustrated her is there would be this little clicker and this kind of a timer thing, and it would get faster and faster and faster. Then there would be this big explosion, and the screen would turn red and shake, and she'd get so angry that she didn't answer it in time, and then and I guess you see this competitive nature in some kids. And let me try again. Right. So, but really, when you think about it, it was really a remarkable machine with the 4 sound registers and all the graphics modes, and it had 64K of memory, 10 of which was taken up by the operating system. No hard drive, a floppy disk drive that would store 128K. I don't even think you can open up an empty Excel worksheet these days in less than 10 times that. And I had one of those little tape drives, the little cartridge tape, that you could program, and its performance was iffy. Sometimes you lost it, right?
Yeah.
Although I got to admit that the disk drive worked really well. And as part of my award my reward for my software with the Atari Program Exchange, I got a second disk drive. It says, I don't know if you remember, you can daisy chain them.
Sure, yeah.
Plug in the cable back of one and into the next one.
Yeah.
And then put the tape drive at the end because it didn't have another outlet. And so, I played with it a lot, right? And the thing that's interesting compared to the job I have now is part of my Exxon job back there in the 80s is when I first, I built my first linear program for Exxon in 1975. And although my career path was an engineer and as a manager, I always looked at these computer tools, and especially LPs, as a very valuable tool for engineers. And I started thinking, well, I wonder if I could build a little LP solver on my Atari. And this would have been in like about 82, 83. And the company I work for now bought a program called PIMS, which is a LP support system for building refinery models. And the guy who founded the company that built that software rolled it out in 1989. Right? I just was a little ahead of the game, and it just didn't have the horsepower. And of course, I was still trying to advance my career with Exxon and had a young family, and so I kind of gave up on it. But that's my interest in LPs and building computer models of refineries and chemical plants started way back then. And when I left Exxon, I decided to see if I could get a job with Aspentek, and they go, gee, with all that refining experience, and you already know our software and LPs and all that type of stuff, absolutely. And so we worked out an arrangement, and I've been doing it for the last 15 years.
Nice.
It's taken me to 22 different countries. I'm getting ready to slow down, though. I told my boss I wasn't interested in taking those long international flights any longer.
Yeah.
So that's how that's pretty much my history.
Nice. That's awesome. So I'm curious. Oh, first of all, did your children use Character Fun? Did they learn letters? Did they just have fun drawing pictures with it?
Oh yeah, I mean, my daughter liked all the letters and numbers that she could make different colors, and she got a big kick that she could make them upside down and scroll the screen. My son was more into the joysticks, and he'd build the potato head and the Lego stuff and make these complex pictures, which I allowed them to save to a disk and read them back in. And then one of the joysticks would put basically an asterisk character on top of it with a big phaser sound, and then he'd go destroy his pictures. He had a great time, because those were the early video games.
Right. So I can't imagine that it sold. You probably didn't even get any royalty statements because you were in the final APX catalog, and they just closed it up right after. So. Yeah,
the catalog mine was in was the little pamphlet, the one that was about 8 inches tall. And
yeah.
10 pages or something. It was in color. I probably have a copy around here somewhere. I was looking for it when I got your note. I go, gee, that's got to be around here somewhere, right? And I did at one time find some emulators, and I found Character Fun, and I sent it to my kids, and I said, hey, look what I found, right? And they tried it, and they said, yeah, well, I remember this. But I got to admit, one of our favorite games was one called Newell.
Oh, yeah.
Multi-use land equipment.
Yeah, something like that.
And you'd take
labor element, multi-use labor element.
Yeah, and you had energy and food and crystite and smith ore, right? And there were different characters that you could pick, which would handicap how much money you got to start with. So I'd always take the one that had the least money and move the slowest. My son would eventually take the same one, and then my daughter would take the beginning one where she moved faster and had more money, right? Because she was 2.5 years younger than my son, and we used to play that for hours. And it was a good concept. The economic, and the you could actually collude, right? And the trading and the sales. I'm playing this with a 5 and a 7-year-old, right? And they love it. So they liked the Miner 2049er and all those other games. I mean, we had a lot of them.
Sure.
But when sometimes when I look at the games today, I said, there really aren't many games out there where the concept of the game is different. The graphics are just more detailed, so we have to have these high-powered processors. But you still have the level games, you still have the shoot 'em up games, you still have kind of the board games, the strategy games, right? But there don't seem to be a whole lot of different fundamental games that have come out. Right? And most of them that
Right. Yeah, Newell is fundamentally a economic simulation, which doesn't sound fun, but it really was.
It was.
Yeah.
I mean, and I was kind of startled that my kids got to like it, and part of it, I'm sure, they enjoyed spending time with their dad, right? But I had all these other games, and they would play them usually by themselves. The thing that was nice about that game is you could have up to 4 players, and if you had less than 4, the computer would play the other ones. So there are always 4 players. And when you think about it, if you had 3 players, you couldn't play it on an Apple. It only had 2 joysticks.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So it was pretty much an Atari-only kind of program. So it was a big part of our household. And yes, my first computer console was Pong.
Good.
Right? Yeah. So it I always had that type of thing, and then as the other computers came out and the AT clone came out, the AT came out. My first was an AT clone by, I think it was Spear Technologies was the name of the company, and then the next one was a Gateway, and then a Dell. Right. In fact, I still have my Dell desktop. It's still running mostly as an email server. It just goes to my email accounts and downloads it every 5 minutes or so. And it's running, Windows. I think it's still running Windows XP, right? It's kind of slow, but, when you think that I bought it in 2000, I guess that's not bad.
So Character Fun was done in machine language. I'm wondering how you...
It was actually programmed in BASIC.
Oh, really? And compiled?
Then there was a software product that came out that was called P-Code. it wasn't a true compiler. They didn't say P code was really a machine language. It was more still an interpreted language, but it's far more efficient. And there was a few things, as I recall, it didn't support. So as long as you avoid those, so I got that and tried it, and it made the game run basically like machine code. I did get a compiler, but it was tedious to use. I mean, it was a 4-step approach, and you had to keep saving these files, and then load those files, and it would go through the next step. P code was a one step. You just pointed it to the basic code, and it read it, and it created an executable, and it ran.
Huh, neat.
All right, and that's what I actually submitted to Atari Program Exchange. I mean, they wanted a disk that had the basic code on it, so they knew that I had written it. Right, and I said, that's fine.
Sure.
Right. If somebody steals it, I'm not going to lose a lot of sleep over it. But that's how eventually the game sped up. Now, there were things like the background music and some of the other features in there where I built machine language into text strings, right, and then used the routine to trigger them. And that gets tedious, right? I mean, machine language is always tedious. And of course, having to design all those characters and the little bitmaps, and then figure out how to build those into text strings, so that then you could index into them. But it was fun, and I enjoyed doing it. My kids got a kick out of it. They learned what I wanted them to learn. They had fun with it, and of course, as they got older, where I took typewriting in 7th grade, right? I wondered if it was still going to be required, and it wasn't. And I insisted that when they went to middle school that they sign up for keyboarding, which is what they called it then instead of typewriting.
Right.
Right. And I said, it's a critical skill, right? I mean, computers are not going to go away for a long time, right? And the QWERTY keyboard is not going away for a long time, so you better get proficient at it. And they did.
Cool. Nice. You said you still have your Atari somewhere tucked away. I'm wondering if you still have the discs of the unreleased software you did, the Battleship and anything else.
I don't think so. In one of my moves, 2 of the boxes didn't make it through. And they said that everything was delivered. And I said, no, I actually took a picture of the boxes in the various rooms where they were, and I've circled the 2 where I had I didn't write Atari across them. I just put a big A on them. And I said, I can't find those anywhere, right? And I said, this is all my source code for the things that I wrote, right? And North American finally agreed to pay me $3,000 for having lost it.
Wow.
Right? So, no, I don't.
That's too bad, man.
Now I have a printout of it.
All right, there you go. Nice.
I mean, after I got your note, I went back into my den, and up there was a little soft pamphlet, and it's got the Character Fun documentation in it. And in the back was a printout from my dot matrix printer of the source code.
Oh, cool.
I mean, it's not very long. It's not very long because obviously you can't make very big programs, but if you actually tried it, it's amazing how much I put into that little package.
You could squeeze a lot into a little. Well, if you'd like me to scan that and put it up in the Atari archives, I'd be happy to do that.
I guess I can scan it and email it to you.
Cool. That'd be fun. If you have the time, that'd be awesome.
Hey, no problem. Anything else you want?
No, I have what I need. Thank you so much, Bruce.
No, I think it's kind of neat that you do this. All right, because I mean, one of the things I tell my kids is it took a lawsuit with Sperry Rand to come out with this because 2 of the big computer companies sued each other trying to claim that they built the first digital computer. And the judge finally ruled that the first one was built in the electrical engineering department of Iowa State University, where I went to school.
Oh, neat.
Right,
cool.
And I forget what it was called, ENIAC or something like that. That doesn't usually get credit, but there have been some books published, that have a picture of the professor and a couple of his grad students that were working on it. But so yeah, I'll track that down and scan it and send it to you.
Cool, great. Thanks for your time.
Enjoyed it, Kevin. Take care.
If you enjoy these interviews and would like to contribute something, I encourage you instead to donate to one of our favorite organizations, the Internet Archive, at archive.org. The Internet Archive is a nonprofit digital library with the stated mission of universal access to all knowledge. They've done incredible things to preserve computer history, including hosting thousands of programs in an in-browser Atari emulator, creating the Wayback Machine, and offering full-page scans of countless Atari computer books and magazines. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate.